it's just my pleasure. Our first featured reader of the evening, Nik Greene. Nik Greene is a writer, which makes sense because he is currently pursuing an MFA in creative writing at San Francisco State. If you have any ideas about what he should do after that, please tell me. He currently lives in Oakland with his girlfriend and his dog. Welcome, Nik.
Hi, everyone. So I got a haircut because I'm going to be an officiant at a wedding in a couple weeks, which is a very hopeful occasion. So it kind of balances things out. I'm about to read you, probably. Okay. Perfect pets. This was your dream when you were 10. One Christmas morning, or maybe on your birthday, your parents presented you with a red ribbon box that rocked and swayed, a soft yip issuing from inside. It couldn't be, wasn't supposed to be, but yes, a dog, finally a dog. All your letters to Santa, a fake, of course you know now, pleading looks, offhand comments, Matt's got this dog now and he's learning so much responsibility, had paid off. As you lifted the box's lid, a black nose arced from the darkness and brushed its wetness across your cheek. He was a spaniel, just the breed you'd asked for, smart, loyal, affectionate, and more beautiful than you could have imagined. Radiant green eyes, a white coat as deep and lush as down, with a brown spot on his side the shape of a distant continent. You named him Trevor, and together you chased each other across snow-blanketed hills and fields until Trevor caught you, or you caught him, and he jumped into your arms and slapped his raspy tongue against your chin and nose. Back home, lungs burning from exertion, heart drowning in love, you curled up next to the crackling fireplace and let the steam from your mug of cocoa wash over your face to leave a refreshing chill behind. Trevor nestled in the crook of your arm. His chin rested on your shoulder, and the soft rhythm of his breaths pulled you into a gentle sleep where you dreamt of nothing, because nothing could be wanted. But in your beachside California town, it hadn't snowed since 1918, and your dad never lit the fireplace. Put a sweater on if you're cold, he said, and it was never that cold anyway. Your mom was allergic to dogs. One time as a child, she'd played with a friend's husky and had broken out in weepy hives along her neck and arms. Her tongue thickened and threatened to block her trachea, and she'd spend a night in the hospital. So Trevor never came, or a spaniel like him, or a lab, collie, boxer, greyhound, or chihuahua, or even a half-blind mutt, hips trembling with dysplasia. You would have loved any of them, but they never came, and you were only left with that dream. Instead, one day your mom brought home a cage of rats. The high school science teacher, known for using his tie to wipe the sandwich crumbs from his mustache, and reading a book of erotic poetry, its pages smudged with potato grease between periods because he secretly wished he taught English literature, had been using the rats in his freshman science class to demonstrate the life cycle of mammals. The rats had served their purpose, and he was on his way to release them into the meadow behind the school when he ran into your mom, the art teacher, who was taking her last class of the day cigarette break at the end of the staff parking lot. She thought the rodents, strangers to the cruelty of the animal world, and fat with corn chips and Oreos fed to them by teenagers, would be slaughtered by feral cats and the hawks and owls that lived in the woods beyond the meadow. It's a death sentence, she said to the science teacher. He shrugged, dabbed soda from the quivering hairs above his upper lip with a tip of an electric blue paisley number, and said, I was teaching them about the life cycle, which includes, death. You can have them if you want. She took 4 of the 30 rats he offered, selecting the ones she thought had the most sophisticated air, and left the science teacher to play God with the rest. He brought the rats home in a multi-tiered wire cage, where the rats had plenty of room to bounce and skitter between the levels, pink claws gripping the wire bars, ropey tails slashing at the air. You didn't want them. You didn't want anything except a dog, but your mom was so happy. She was already naming them after Impressionist painters, telling you how much fun it would be to have a pet in the house after all this time. And she knew it was no replacement for a dog, but they're very smart. Smarter than dogs, maybe. Not as cute, you said. Poking the one she had named Cezanne in the belly, it released a ghastly squeak. At first you ignored the new creatures, who clattered between the levels of the cage and tapped against the little ball at the end of the water bottle, even when it was empty. And spent time with your friends, or more specifically friend, Matt, who had returned from summer vacation with fuzz on his lips and pit stains on his denim shirts. But Matt didn't want to play basketball anymore, or with Nerf guns in the backyard, or chase his dog, who never actually taught Matt anything about responsibility, because you never saw him walk the dog or feed it, or scoop up its mountainous dumps, or even scratch the dog when it had a hard-to-reach spot behind its ear. Instead, he wanted to spend those empty, sluggish post-school hours in his bedroom, door shut, blinds drawn, lights dimmed so low the switch hummed, huddled shoulder to shoulder over the wrinkled magazines he'd stolen from his brother's closet. You didn't find anything arousing about the languid nakedness of the bored women spread across the magazine's wrinkled pages, but instead saw in their pursed lips and silky hair a grim harbinger of the inevitability of desire. Though clearly Matt, hand trembling as he peeled back each worn page, filling the shadowy room with his throaty, inhuman croaks, didn't have any issues with his burgeoning adolescent lust. You abandoned Matt in his conception of communal carnality and chose to spend your 6th grade afternoons with the rats. You came home, spooned Nesquik into a glass of cold milk. It was the closest thing you got to hot cocoa, and began a strict regiment of training your rats, who approached the bars of the cage willingly enough when you held out a piece of bright orange processed cheese. But when you attempted to scoop them out so you could teach them how to sit pretty or play dead, they refused and latched their rubbery claws into the cage bars in a death grip, and nipped your hands with knife-sharp incisors until you left them alone to romp and carouse together amongst the newspaper's shredded sports section on the cage's bottom level. After that, you continued yourself to jotting notes and observation of the rat's behavior. Maybe it was your fate to become a zoologist or a veterinarian, someone who would love not just dogs, but all animals, even ones that squeaked and squirmed and wrestled around in their cage like UFC fighters. Degas bit Matisse's tail, you wrote, while in the next room your mom hummed in her studio where she was making papier-mâché masks for which the theater teacher described as a realistic portrayal of Noah's Ark, and included a pair of every animal known to science. It was a production under planning for years, and would become endless because the list of animals on Earth is ever growing, and though your mom was already on the L animals now, specifically the lemur, and was scheduled to reach the zebra in 4 years, she would then need to return to the beginning of the alphabet and make the masks for all the animals discovered in the jungles of the Amazon, or beside volcano vents on the ocean floor in the years since she started the project. You wrote, Monet clings to Matisse's back, Cézanne pins Degas in the corner. Then loud enough for your parents to hear, you said, they're going to kill each other. Down the hallway, the rustle of papers and pen scratches in your dad's study as he graded exams ceased, before he intoned, with professorial certainty, of course they are, they're animals. You were both wrong. The rat's intent wasn't murderous, not yet. There had been more diversity in the rat's gender than your mom, no master of rodent physiognomy had thought, and what you had mistaken for violence was only the rat's fervent procreation. They're 8 now, you said, pulling your mom by her wrists into your bedroom one afternoon, interrupting her on the way to paint the pair of leopard masks that had recently finished drying. She studied the cage for a moment, confirming arithmetic. We'll get a bigger cage if we need to, she said. The multiplication continued. Soon there were 12, then 15, and then you stopped trying to keep notes of the rat's behavior, and your mom shifted from impressionism to cubism for the names. But by that point, the rats were uncountable, their furry bodies piling on top of each other, a single mass of undulating black and brown fur, pebbles of crap spilling out from the bottom tray. The stink of their droppings filled your room and then the whole house. Your mom purchased another, grander cage with a swimming pool and electric exercise wheel, and as you were moving the rats from your old home to the new, you found the first evidence of the rat's darker nature. A gleaming skeleton at the bottom of the cage, a bit of dark fur attached to the underside of its skull, but otherwise picked clean of any meat or sinew. Your mom was disgusted. She took you with her to the field, the one behind the high school where she saved the rats in the first place, pulled the cage from the car and plopped into the grass. For the first time, the rats were motionless, all looking up at you, red eyes glowing in the fading light of the day. Why do we have to let them go, you asked? Because they're vermin, they're cannibals. What sort of a boy will you What sort of a boy will you be if you grow up with cannibals in your room? She opened the door of the cage and held it upside down and began to shake, and rats rained onto the ground. There might have been 100 of them now, in a squirming cavalcade of tails, twitching wiry whiskers, half-chewed ears, and pink claws scurrying into the undergrowth. Their squeaks and squeals of fear, or maybe it was the joy at their freedom, made you wince. She shook and shook the cage till they were all gone, along with the newspaper clippings and the pellets of food that looked just like their crap, and only when the last rat had disappeared into the tall grass did she stop throttling the cage, her face the pure red of ketchup, her blouse patched with sweat. She dropped the cage on the ground and got back into the car, and sat silently as you watched the grass bend in the breeze. The tumult of the rat's escape, the desire they'd expressed with absolute abandon, had stirred something inside of you, a thing that the creased and greasy pages of Matt's magazines had been unable to awaken. Hormones pooling on the back of your tongue, an unknowable urge pricked at your sternum as you climbed into your car with your mom and went home. The next pet accidentally arrived to your house when you were 15. It was summer, the hottest of your lifetime. The walls of the house swelled and sweated in the swampy heat. Your home had no air conditioning, only ceiling fans, which only challenged the heat to discover new avenues of assault upon your bodies. Your mother was forced to transfer the painted stork to red deer mask from her studio to the basement, lest the triple-digit temperatures unravel the fragile assemblies of flour, water, and newspaper, and ruin 1.5 years of labor. At the same time, the water pressure in the old house plunged to the point the faucet only released a pathetic dribble, hardly strong enough to brush your teeth. Cold showers, the only respite from the heat, were impossible. Your father was a philosophy professor at the community college, who lived by a personal edict of self-sufficiency based on, he claimed, an alternate reading of Aristotle's Ethics. This dictate made it incapable of asking anyone to perform maintenance on the house, and he determined to complete the repairs of the house's water pressure, even though, fresh on everyone's mind, was the time he had attempted to upgrade the house's insulation, which if he completed the job would have benefited you all that scorching summer. But he put his face into a spider's nest in the crawl space, and rushed down the attic steps and out into the backyard, emitting a strange, shrill whine, pulling at the papery web that stuck to his beard, slapping at the baby spiders that streamed down his neck inside his shirt before he dropped and rolled about the lawn, while your mom, failing to suppress her giggles, sprayed him down with a garden hose. While your dad rent the pipes in the basement in search of the blockage affecting the house's fluid dynamics, you and your mom waited, taking shelter in the shade of a plum tree and drinking dark, sticky sweet soda from plastic bottles. After hours of listening to clangs and bangs of wrench on metal, your father's indecipherable clenched teeth curses, he cried out in joy and called for you both to come see, his voice tone conveying an assurance that Aristotle would be proud of his self-reliance. He stood on the concrete slab of the basement, oily pipe elbows and dented tools scattered at his feet, greasy water caked in his beard and hair. "Look," he said, pointing at the exposed end of a pipe near the water heater. "It's a rock, I think." The object he had pointed to was similar to a stone, though more uniform, and with several holes along its side. Then a tiny head, no bigger than the end of your thumb, protruded from one hole, and stubby little feet from the others. Gently your father used a pair of pliers to tease the tortoise from the pipe, and plopped the reptile, half blind with bleach and shampoo and soap and toothpaste, into your outstretched hands. They let you keep it as a pet. Your mom got a terrarium from that same science teacher who had spent the previous year teaching the life cycle of a reptile, only to again release a swarm of garter snakes into the fields, where, hopefully, they would abate the rat population that had overrun the field and the woods beyond, and were rumored to be so efficient in their hunting that they could strip an unsuspecting raccoon to the bone in a few minutes. Like piranhas, which they sold at the specialty pet store where your mom took you to get supplies for the tortoise's new home, and where the pet store employee, an acne teen not much older than you, explained that your tortoise was one of many reptiles and amphibians, flushed down toilets across America. Who knows where it originated or how far away? It might have swum through miles of pipes, avoiding septic tanks and passages leading to the sewer. That tortoise is a survivor, the employee said. Back home, you decorated the terrarium with twigs and rocks and fed the tortoise bits of lettuce and blueberries, and watched it closely as it ruminated, slowly and zen-like, on a piece of radicchio. There was something of a sage to this reptile, how it sat for long hours beneath the heat lamp, its noseless face cocked at a thoughtful tilt, and your father agreed, telling you should name it Plato, or if you felt the tortoise was more of an iconoclast, Socrates. Unfortunately, the tortoise's intellectual nature made it disinclined to aerobic activities, and when you tried to play fetch with it in the backyard, it simply snapped the twig you'd thrown in half, and then went in search of some shade to equalize its internal temperature. In the evenings, you held the tortoise in your lap, its shell cool and comforting as tempered ceramic, and stroked the soft skin on top of its head with your forefinger. After a few weeks, you noticed the tortoise emerged less and less from the overturned piece of bark that served its den, and its head hung low now when it did. Its appetite faltered, and the greenish pallor of its skin began to fade to a sickly yellow-gray. It's probably lonely, the pet store teen told you when you went back with your concerns. Lonely? In the end, the teen leaned in close across the store counter. Everything just wants to get laid. Fortunately, this conceit wasn't difficult for you to understand. Mike and his journals of flesh were a cobweb memory, but you become inculcated in the alchemy of arousal anyway, along with new and sundry means of pleasurable release, and though till now your erotic experiments have been conducted autonomously. I'll take another tortoise then, a girl this time, you told the employee. He shook his head and went on to explain that though your tortoise might need a mate, his species, a yellow stripe native to West Africa, wasn't legally available for commercial sale. He told this to the tortoise back home, showing it a picture you printed from the internet of another yellow stripe in the wild, harpooning a leaf with its beak mouth. Your tortoise heaved itself with fervor toward the image, only to rebound off the terrarium glass. Then you took out a world atlas, and with your finger traced the thousands of miles across sea and land it would take for it to return home. The tortoise's eyes lit up in understanding. It sauntered back beneath the lamp, and lifted its head, you thought, at a more optimistic angle. The next day the tortoise got to work, using its mouth to pull twigs. The next day the tortoise got to work, using its mouth to pull.
Water?
Yeah, please.
Just a little wine.
Okay, I can get to this next paragraph without anything else. The next day the tortoise got to work, using its mouth to pull twigs and bark into parallel lines, and weaving them together with surprising proficiency. The work was deliberate and slow, but having a project did well for the tortoise's health. It ate feverishly at the apple core you gave it for lunch that day, and the hue of its skin brightened. When it ran out of twigs, you gathered more from the backyard and plopped them in the corner, careful not to disturb the tortoise in its work. Within a few days, an 8-inch square lattice had been formed, a raft, and the tortoise sat in its center, waiting for a chance to express that yearning that swelled in its reptilian heart. So you walked to the beach, the tortoise in its creation cradled in your arms, waded into the gray waves of the Pacific, and guided the tortoise's ship out past the shallow swells. You propped up the sail of leaves, tidied the ration of fruit and celery, and gave the tortoise one last rub atop its scaly head. It nudged back at your finger, eyes closed in thanks. On shore, you sat on the sand with the August sun dry your jean shorts. It was difficult to make out the tortoise against the glare of the sun as the tide took it out to sea. You hoped the ship was strong enough to survive the trip, and a southern current would push him towards Baja, where, if it was lucky, it would coast through the Panama Canal. Hurricane season was nearly over, so it wouldn't have too many obstacles across the Caribbean before reaching the Atlantic, and then the western coast of Africa, perhaps arriving by winter in its native Angola. Then the tortoise would crawl up on the shore, shake the foamy surf from its shell, and sip triumphantly at its ancestral hair through two little half-moon nostrils. That night your father came into your room, noticed the empty terrarium, and said, "You didn't flush it down the toilet, did you?" "No," you said. "I sent him home."